I don't quite know where I'm going to finish today, so I might finish a little bit early, I might finish a little bit late. The great advantage with being guinea pigs for a newly designed course is that we have these slight problems. But what we're going to be looking at this week, now we're back on schedule with regular classes, is the architecture and the art of the Flavian period. Well, in the last class we were looking at Nero, the work of Nero. Towards the end of his reign as emperor, Nero started to become rather unpopular. He became more and more suspicious of his advisors, and they in turn didn't really like the way he behaved. Remember, he became emperor when he was 18 years old. And for the first few years he had a couple of really good advisors, one of them Seneca the Younger, also his mother, but then he got resentful about the power they had, so he bumps off his mother and Seneca dies as well. And he wants to follow an artistic career. He doesn't really want to be an emperor, but being an emperor allows him to be an artist, to take part in chariot races and singing competitions and all that type of thing. And this makes him rather unpopular at Rome amongst senior politicians in particular. But then the Great Fire of AD 64. A rumour starts that Nero deliberately started that fire to destroy Rome so that he could build a new Greek-style city called Neropolis. Well, there's no evidence that that is the case, but of course, once the Great Fire had finished, Nero does start building his Domus Aurea, this enormous park in the centre of the town. So it adds to the rumour. Well, Nero is aware of this, and he tries to put the blame for the Great Fire on a group of people called the Christians, and so they all start getting killed off. But the Roman people still think Nero's got a hand in it somewhere. But what really happened, the final straw, was that Nero had an exceptionally wonderful general called Corbulo. I like Corbulo because he was in Ankara at one point in his career. Corbulo, the most successful general of the time, had just finished a wonderful campaign against the Parthians over the Armenia. Remember the Sebasteon relief in Aphrodisias that shows Nero and the capture of Armenia? Well, Corbulo was the man responsible for that. Nero becomes convinced that Corbulo is going to start a rebellion against him, and basically Corbulo is forced to kill himself. This starts getting all the senior politicians of the time really worried about what's going to happen next. And one of them, a man called Galba, who's the governor of Spain, one part of Spain, actually decides to rebel against Nero. This is Galba over here. The Senate does a most remarkable thing. The Principate is a form of government like a monarchy, but it's still technically a republic, a Roman republic. The Senate votes Galba as the new princeps of Rome. Nero loses his job. Nero now decides on suicide rather than risk a trial. He kills himself on the 9th of June in the year 68. He had no children of his own. All his close male relatives had died out. So that's the end of the Julio-Claudian period. Well, Galba gets to Rome in late 68. He has no children of his own. He adopts the young son of a very important Roman family as his son to take over after he dies. This upsets this man, Otho. Otho is Galba's best friend. Why not me? Why not me? Otho is commander of the Praetorian Guard. Guess what happened? Well, you can see. From summer 68 to the end of January 69, this man is the emperor. Otho becomes emperor with the support of the Praetorian Guard. Well, Otho is a man with a rather nasty reputation. He divorced one of his, I think it was his first or his second wife, because Nero decided he wanted to have an affair with her. So Otho said, "Oh, that's all right, you can have my wife. She's divorced now, she's free." You know, so nobody really liked Otho very much. Particularly not this man over here, Vitellius, the governor of Germany, a massive army. So Vitellius, his army declares him emperor. He marches on Rome, a battle in the north of Italy. And I think it was October? No, a bit earlier than that. Summer of 69, and Otho is killed, and Vitellius marches into Rome with an army and is declared princeps. Well, by this time, other people are beginning to think, I've got a Roman army, why don't I become emperor? And the senior generals basically agree to support one of their colleagues, one of their friends, in an attempt at taking over the Roman Empire. Nobody really likes Vitellius very much. And so this man, Vespasian, is given the opportunity to start a rebellion against Vitellius to become princeps. Well, Vespasian at the time was fighting in Judea, the Roman province of Judea. The Jews had revolted against Roman rule in the year 66. Vespasian was sent there with an army to deal with this revolt. He did quite well, although the revolt didn't actually finish until 72 or 73. But he's in command of several legions, and he gets lots of support from other Roman generals. And his allies march on Rome, Vitellius is killed, and Vespasian is declared emperor in December of 69. Well, we talk about the year 69 as the year of the four emperors, Galba, Otho, Vitellius, and Vespasian. But it also marks the beginning of what we know as the Flavian period. The family name of Vespasian is Flavius. His name is Titus Flavius Vespasianus. He has two sons. The older one, Titus Flavius Vespasianus, becomes the Emperor Titus, and Titus Flavius Domitianus. We'll come to him a bit later. So this marks the beginning of the Flavian period. He becomes emperor. He's got two sons. The Roman people think, at last we're going back to normality. When Vespasian dies, it will be a sad day, but he's got a son, Titus, who can take over. And if Titus dies, then there's Domitian as well. Vespasian. The Flavian family were a very remarkable one. His own grandfather was a plebeian, one of the ordinary Roman citizens at Rome. His grandfather was a tax collector under Augustus, and surprise, surprise, the tax collector Flavius became quite rich. Nothing like a little bit of corruption when you're a tax collector in the Roman Empire. His grandfather becomes rich enough to afford or to pay for his father to become a member of the equestrian class. The equestrian class, or knights of Rome, this is the middle class of Rome, the well-to-do people. They're not normally senators or anything like that, but they're sort of wealthy merchants and army officers of Rome. His father becomes rich enough for both Vespasian and Vespasian's older brother to become members of the Senate. To become a member of the Senate, you have to have property valued at 1 million sesterces, so you're thinking roughly in terms of about $4 million in modern currency. So, I mean, this is a very wealthy family. But it's important to know this particular part about Vespasian's origins, is because to understand his portraiture. Now, Vespasian's older brother dies in the fight for Rome in the year AD 69. But there's no evidence that Vespasian's older brother would have stopped Vespasian from becoming emperor. When we look at portraits of Vespasian, we see this verist approach again. Well, Nero had used the Verist approach to promote the idea that he was a man of the people, you know, sort of just an ordinary person. But people were very much aware that Nero saw himself as somebody really special. He pretended to be a man of the people, but in reality he was filthy rich. He wanted to be an artist. It's the type of thing that you see in the American elections at the moment with Mitt Romney sort of pretending to be a man of the people, and he puts a pair of jeans on and he looks totally and utterly ridiculous because everybody knows that he wears a suit all the time. Well, it's the same sort of thing with Nero. He tries to be a man of the people with his various portraits, but people don't accept it. Vespasian, very different. Even though Vespasian's filthy rich, Vespasian has himself shown in this sort of kindly, grandfatherly manner. People know what his family background is. They know that his grandfather was a tax collector. They know he's what they would call the new men, a novus homus. He's the new man. Rich family, but we get this beautiful Verist portrait of him. I love this one on his coin, and these are different portraits from different parts of the Roman Empire. I mean, he looks a plain and a simple man. His portraits basically say, what you see is what you get. I can be kind, I can be stern, I can be serious. And he really was a man of the people. He was a man who had a wonderful sense of humour. When he came into power at Rome, he found the imperial treasury empty. Long period of civil war. So he brings in a whole new series of taxes for the Roman people. They don't really like this, but they accept his argument. I've got to get the economy going again. One of the taxes he brings in is known as the urine tax. Urine, what comes out of you quite naturally in liquid form, was used for cleaning wool in the Roman period. Public toilets for men in the Roman period were large jars outside the shops, the offices of people who clean wool. So you went along to the jar and you did your business, and the owner of the shop took the urine in and used it for cleaning the wool. Vespasian puts a tax on this. Suddenly what had been a free toilet for a man to use is no longer a free toilet. The owner has to pay a tax on the contents. So Vespasian brings in this tax, and his older son Titus comes up to him and says, "Dad, how can you do something like this? I mean, when a man's got to go, a man's got to go. And I mean, really, and this is a bit much. I mean, it's dirty money, yeah." Vespasian puts his hand in his pocket. He pulls out 2 coins. He rubs them together. He holds them under Titus's nose. Does it smell? You get a sense of humour behind it. I mean, he's a nice guy. I like Vespasian. Anyway, Vespasian, the emperor I really like. Vespasian, though, was also a man that knew that to get the support of the Roman people, he had to keep them happy. The first thing he does when he arrives in Rome in the year 70 is to start rebuilding the Domus Tiberiana. The Domus Aurea now becomes a public guest house. It becomes, the park around the Domus Aurea becomes a public park. And in connection with this particular process, what he decides to do is to build this. Often called the Colosseum, but you will learn to call it the Flavian Amphitheatre, which is its proper name. The name Colosseum was developed by a monk in the 7th century in England, a monk called Bede, who wanted to refer to this. He knew it stood by a colossus, a large statue of Apollo, and so he gave it the name Colosseum because it fitted in with a rhyme he prepared, that Rome will shine until the Colosseum will fall. You see, it's the Flavian Amphitheatre. and only I'm allowed to call it the Colosseum by accident when I'm not concentrating. The rest of you is the Flavian amphitheatre. Well, you all know what an amphitheatre is. An amphitheatre is a very exceptional building in one particular sense, in that it is purely Roman in form and function. It's something that the Romans developed for their own particular interest and hobbies. It's an oval building, well, it's not actually oval, it's elliptical, as you'll see in a moment, or rather in several moments. Not quite oval, it's an elliptical building. It's designed for gladiatorial contests. Now the next part of this class is going to take you into gladiatorial contests, because people often have the wrong idea about what gladiatorial contest involved. What is a gladiatorial contest? Well, it's something that the Romans got from the Etruscans. We know that when an important Etruscan man died, there would be a series of contests and games, athletic festivals. The idea was to celebrate his memory by holding these shows. And as part of these shows, you would have a gladiatorial contest. The idea seems to be, we don't really understand exactly what's going on, but the idea seems to be that the gladiatorial contest, which was to the fight for the Etruscans, to the death for the Etruscans, was to show that man need not have any fear of death. Sounds rather strange. You fight to the death, might be your death, to show that you have no fear of death. But this is something that the Romans got from the Etruscans. The Romans give this type of contest the name munus. The name means a duty, and the Romans adopt the idea of the gladiatorial game as a family duty to celebrate the life of a member of the family, to celebrate a specific event. We assume that the Romans took the idea from the Etruscans. At the time, Rome was ruled by Etruscan kings. We know that the Etruscans introduced the sport of chariot racing to Rome. The Etruscans built the Circus Maximus over there for chariot racing. This is a specifically Etruscan sport. The Circus Maximus as it is today, not quite always a car park, but always surrounded by cars like this. I'll be talking a bit more about this when we look at the work of Trajan. The sort of place where people would do a series of laps in a very light chariot around a central area. Notice that decoration in the middle. This is a relief plaque that does show an actual chariot race. I think this dates to the 1st century. Just to give you some idea of what a chariot race is like, I could have shown you something from the film Ben-Hur, but there's a place in France, a rebuilt Roman amphitheatre, where they do occasionally have these restored Roman chariot races. They are not very nice things to watch. They are pretty dangerous. They do go pretty fast, actually, as well. Well, this is the basic idea of a chariot race in a French amphitheatre, restored for the purpose. And you can see they race 7 times around this central area here. Now, the reason I mention this is because we still have chariot races in the Circus Maximus. Every year on the anniversary of the foundation of Rome, you get a group of crazy Romans who get on their bicycles with these little chariots. It's well worth being there to watch what goes on that day. The first gladiatorial games at Rome were held in the Circus Maximus. This is what we have here. Now look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These are called the eggs. These were the markers for each time the chariots went around the Circus Maximus. So we know this is the Circus Maximus, right? The column standing in the centre. But as you can see, it represents a gladiatorial competition. In this particular case, it's a specific type of gladiator fight. It's one of a series known as the venationes. These are fights of gladiators against wild animals, and sometimes wild animals against wild animals. And you can see here you've got a half-naked gladiator, you've got a panther or a lioness on one side, a lion over there. The lion is being forced against him. That man is using a spear to make the lion attack him. And you can see that some poor dead person down there has already had a bit of a problem with this. Well, what you find happening in the imperial period, and the sort of thing that would have happened in the Flavian amphitheatre, before I go on to describe that, is in the morning, venationes like this. Wild animals against wild animals, a bull against an elephant, dogs, bears, a lion against a tiger. Well, we all know what happened in Ankara Zoo recently. Who won the lion against a tiger in that particular case? Tiger did. Yeah. Oh, right, yes. Be careful going to Ankara Zoo. You never know what might happen there. Venationes. Then there'll be the lunchtime break. During the lunchtime break, basically, that's when criminals were executed. You were sent out, if you were lucky, with a sword, and another man would come out with a sword, and you would fight each other until one of you died. And then you would stand there, if you were the winner, and wait for the next one to come out. And it would go on until everybody, one man was left standing, and then he was executed. Sometimes they used prisoners of war for this lunchtime entertainment. Just, it's a bit hot, you don't want to get too excited. Sometimes criminals would be executed by the beast, the subject of many popular Victorian paintings. After the lunchtime came the munera, the actual things we would call the gladiatorial games. Now, in some cases, these might start off with fights to the death by gladiators who were criminals, who were dressed properly as gladiators, who might be prisoners of war. But more often than not, they were professional fighters. What that means, they did not usually fight to the death. This is a later development in Roman tradition. A gladiator is an investment. You pay money for a slave, you train him from youth to be a gladiator. You don't want your investment to die in its first fight. So gladiatorial contests were specifically designed to show different skills. I forgot I had this one on. They've just found a gladiator cemetery at York in England, and they found this piece of skull, and as you can see, a lion tooth fits exactly in the hole. So this is somebody who died in a venationes, a Roman gladiator. Gladiatorial contests would normally involve two men dressed in different styles, fighting against each other. You would normally have one very heavily armoured gladiator, and you would have one lightly armoured gladiator. Has anybody seen the film The Life of The Life of Brian, Monty Python film? There's a wonderful scene in the amphitheatre in which the gladiator's running after somebody, and he's suddenly going, "Oh, I'm having a cardiac arrest," because of the armour he's wearing. Well, this is a gladiator called a murmillo, who's wearing very heavy armour, and he fights a thrax, who wears light armour. This is a modern reproduction. There's the murmillo, very heavy armour, and here's the thrax on this side, much more lightly armoured. So you get some idea of what's actually involved. Another particular type, a secateur and a retiarius. A secateur is armed with a trident and a net. And retiarius is armed with the trident and the net. Secateur has got a short sword. And, they don't look very equally matched, but if you can get your net around your opponent, and you've got your trident down there, you can finish him off. At Ephesus, where they have excavated a Roman gladiator's cemetery, so, yeah, sometime the guy that doesn't have the armour actually won the competition. The Ephesus cemetery has also produced a lot of evidence for types of weapons used by gladiators that we never knew existed. This is the top part of a leg bone, and you can see 1, 2, 3, 4 holes in it like that. We can reconstruct the type of weapon that was used in this. It's not mentioned in any of the literature. But gladiatorial contests were normally between professional fighters and not to the death. That would have been a debilitating wound. They probably would have died as a result of this. And we know that they had referees. The summa rudis, the senior man with the big stick, and the secundus rudis, the second referee. And you see here the two referees. Gladiatorial contests were done on a time-out basis, usually. We don't know how they did the timing. They must have had a sand clock or a water clock, but obviously they had some method of timing, and the fight would go on until that time was over, and then it was a draw or whatever it was. But then some competitions would actually go to the finger. The fight to the finger was when the fight continued until one of the gladiators was wounded or suffered a cut of some kind. That gladiator could then raise one finger, and that meant he surrendered. And now, at this point, a lot would depend on the finances involved, what's going on, the bravery of a gladiator. This would be a fight to the death, and here we have a man who's obviously putting his finger up, sort of, I give in, I surrender. Normally, that would be the end of it, but then sometimes we know the Roman people would have the chance for the pollice verso, to show the thumb. And this would be the way of signalling whether they thought the gladiator should live or should die. Very famous painting here, where you can see everybody going around like that, sort of, he's got them down there like that, hold them in place. And of course you all know this one, don't you? All right? Yeah, from Commodus. Well, it's only natural to think the death sign was that. Probably wasn't. The Romans don't tell us. They just say they made a sign with the thumb. What do they mean? This is my favourite cartoon, actually, which repeats this bit of, the thumbs down. Well, yeah, I'm giving you the finger, mate, but in a slightly different fashion. But the analysis of the skeletons from Ephesus actually shows that a number of the people died. They've got a little cut just there that could only have been done by a sword point being pushed up. Now we do actually have a mosaic in which a man is kneeling, and from the bases, prepare yourself for shock horror, of the Ephesus bones, we know that this is what happened. So it's probably the thumbs up, meaning like that, and not the thumbs down with the signal for death. Don't worry, he's not actually dying, he's a reconstruction gladiator. But this is what the Ephesus evidence actually tells us. We know that a mortally wounded gladiator or a badly wounded gladiator, the referee would call in the doctor just to check if he's still okay. Well, this guy has obviously suffered a pretty bad wound. And again, back to the Ephesus evidence and the York evidence, it's quite clear that if there was any doubt about that person, living or not, then basically you would take a big hammer and go bang, and that was it. So that was the end of the gladiator. Right. Now do you understand about gladiatorial games? Okay. Do we want to see all this again? No. Do go to Ephesus, though, and look at the material evidence. It's really fantastic. No way. For a start, tigers were not chained. Gladiators never wore fantastic armour like that. And that type of thing was only found in a circus, not in an amphitheatre. Do you get the feeling I don't like the film Gladiator? Starts off reasonably okay. The battle scene at the beginning is okay, but the rest of it, nah, forget it. What about amphitheatres themselves, though? Well, the evidence implies that after the Romans captured Magna Graecia, they took the idea of gladiatorial fights there with them, and they used Greek theatres for their competitions. The evidence is rather hazy, but the earliest, what we would call an amphitheatre, the earliest amphitheatres that we know of are all on the edge of Magna Graecia. The earliest stone-built example of what we would call an amphitheatre is at Pompeii, where you have this particular structure. This was built about 70 BC. The inscription calls it a spectacula, a place for spectacles, a place for shows. It doesn't call it an amphitheatre, it's a spectacula. The first recorded use of the word amphitheatre, now the thing here is amphitheatre is a word of Greek origin. It's not Latin, it's a Greek origin word. So again, this hints at something happening in Magna Graecia. Probably the popular local name for something like the Pompeii structure was amphitheatre amongst the local majority Greek-speaking population. But the earliest evidence we have for an amphitheatre at Rome, a description of a complicated structure put up by Scribonius Curio in 53 or 52 BC to celebrate one of his military victories. We're given a description of this. We don't exactly know how it works, we have to admit that. Pliny the Elder, who was writing 100 years after this, tells us that Curio's architects invented a remarkable double wooden theatre that was back to back. And that somehow, remember, permanent theatres are not allowed at Rome by law. Somehow this could be turned around on, must be rails or wheels, to form an amphitheatre, double theatre. So this is the first one that we know of in Rome, and this is the first real evidence we have for this name amphitheatre coming into use. In the morning, people would sit in the theatres, watch shows on either side. Lunchtime, go off and have something to eat. Come back in the afternoon, you had your amphitheatre ready for the gladiatorial games. Well, this was a temporary building. It was up for less than 1 year. We don't know which year, 53 or 52. And we do know that immediately after, or fairly shortly afterwards, in the year 29, a man called Statilius Taurus built an amphitheatre, a stone one, somewhere in the Campus Martius. We don't know where that was. Nothing survives of it above ground. We're also told that Nero built an amphitheatre in the Campus Martius. It's possible that he rebuilt the Theatre of 29. But that was destroyed in the fire of AD 64, so there must have been a lot of wood in it. So Vespasian, back to the Flavian amphitheatre, decides, having made the Domus Aurea an official guest house, this is all now a public park. There's a big statue of Nero there, known as the Colossus, the artificial lake in the centre, and this is where he decides to build the Flavian amphitheatre. This is the first entirely stone-built amphitheatre at Rome. It's built on the site of the lake in Nero's Domus Aurea, so it's got massive concrete foundations which are 5 meters deep. It's a really incredible structure in more ways than one you might think about. The main axis, external axis, is 188, the minor axis is 156. You can see it's not quite oval, it is an elliptical building. It is an amphitheatre in the sense of it is 2 theatres put facing each other. When completed, it had an overall height of 48 metres, and it is the largest amphitheatres in the Roman world. Well, the basic design is, of course, the same as what we see in the theatre of Pompey, the theatre of Marcellus. A lot of concrete, tough travertine to build this structure. In this case, we've got 4 stories. We've got the usual superimposed order system. So Doric, Ionic, Corinthian. The Attic story, the plain story at the top, has got Corinthian pilasters. The interior is divided into 4 seating areas. Usually you only have 3. The names for these, so you should learn these, are the Imma Cavea, the Media Cavea, the Summa Cavea. That's normally what you would find in most amphitheatres or theatres, although not all of them would have that. But then you've got this on the top, the supra cavea, the extra one on the top, like having a supernumerary tooth. It's an extra one on the top there. So it's divided into 4 seating areas, and there is a specific reason for this. The law at Rome specified quite clearly that the different social classes had to sit in different areas. Only men could sit in the 3 lowest areas. Senators at the front, the equestrians or knights in the middle, the plebeians, the next one up, the poor, the women and slaves and children were all on the top. Women were not allowed to sit any lower than that unless they were a member of the imperial family. Now, what this meant is one of the most astounding things about the Flavian amphitheatre that most people don't realise. You've got a massive building that can seat 45 to 50,000 people. How do you get them in and out in a reasonable time? How do you make certain they go to exactly where they're supposed to go to? Well, you have a little ticket, piece of lead, with a number on. And around the amphitheatre at the bottom there are a series of numbered doorways. This is door number 27. Your ticket would say number 27. Now I can't remember where number 27 goes to, but basically whichever one you went in by, your doorway you went in by, it would either take you to the senator's seating area, or the stairways were designed to take you to there, or the stairways were designed to take you to there, or the stairways are designed to take you to there. I'm just going to flash back to this thing, because you see all this whole series of wonderful stairways inside there that mean that people can only go to exactly where they're supposed to be seated. What a Flavian amphitheatre in Rome. Rome can be pretty hot in the summer, just like a modern Spanish bull ring. It gets a bit too sunny, a bit too hot. You can put up a shade, a velarium. The velarium was some kind of cloth structure on a series of posts around the edge of the Flavian amphitheatre, ropes attaching the cloth structure to, it's not quite understood how the whole thing works, but men outside could lift this shade according to the weather. They could roll it down to give you maximum shade, they could lift it up. In a modern Spanish bull ring, you either have the sombre section and the dark, non-sunny section, or you have to sit in the sunny section, solari section. So, but a velarium gets around that problem because it gives you shade all the way around. The Romans did many wonderful things. This is actually a very rough reconstruction drawing of the Aspendus Theatre in Turkey, where you can see the evidence of the velarium much more clearly. So you can see how it works. It's a device that gives you lots of shade. The one at Pompeii, at the amphitheatre, is actually shown on a wall painting. Here's the amphitheatre at Pompeii. This actually represents a fight that took place in the amphitheatre at Pompeii in, I think it was 62 or thereabouts. And you can see people fighting, the different seating levels there. As a result of this fight, Nero stopped all amphitheatre games in Pompeii for 10 years. Now, could you imagine what would happen if there was a football riot, let's say, in Fenerbahce Stadium, and the mayor of Istanbul said no more football games for 10 years? Woo, woo. It's the same type of thing here. But you see around the top, look there, there's the velarium, shown beautifully on this particular wall painting. The basement level, as we see it today, is like that. But as built, this was an ordinary arena, the word arena, sand. It was basically a sand-covered floor. The evidence from Ephesus tells us that gladiators usually fought barefooted. They were flat-footed. By the way, they were also fed a diet of barley and beans, mergimac, that type of stuff. And they were fat, not muscular. Why were they fat? Well, you go into a gladiatorial competition and you're fighting somebody and he goes with his sword. Well, if you've got fat, if you've got that much fat on you, he doesn't cut the muscle. And you can go, I surrender, right, and get away with it. So gladiators were fat. They weren't like Russell Crowe. Or, what's his name, Michael Douglas and Spartacus, or whatever Douglas it was. Anyway, so originally this was completely flat. This was all added by Domitian. This is what we see now, but this was added by Domitian. You can see the surviving areas of seating going up like that. So the cages for the animals around that level. And there is a reference by one Roman historian that when this was open to the public, a naval battle was held inside it, a replica sea battle. They flooded it with water. And everybody didn't believe this until about 5 years ago. They actually found the evidence that, as built, you could fill this with water and you could actually have an imitation sea battle. Well, Vespasian died in 79. He formally opened the amphitheatre, but in actual practice, the Flavian amphitheatre was finished off by Titus Flavius Vespasianus, or Titus, his oldest son. Again, very Verres portrait, beautiful Verres portrait. What nobody knew when he became emperor was that he had a very serious heart condition. And he died in the year 81, which brings us to nasty, horrible Domitian, one of the 3 really bad emperors of Rome, along with Gaius Caligula and Nero. But I like him, actually. He had his good points. Well, this is the guy that we'll be talking about and what he did in the next class. And we're going to start off with the biggest mystery of all in the next class, the date of the Arch of Titus. Ooh. Right.